Hello. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Margaret, and I help back there in the kitchen. Now, I've been asked tonight to share a wee bit about myself with you, and I want to do just that. About 15 years ago, it was 15 years ago this month, I was diagnosed through an MRI scan. I was diagnosed with quite a large brain tumour. That was a devastating blow for me. I'd been attending the doctor for about 6 months and being treated for various things. They had tried a lot of different things because of the way I was feeling. I was treated for vertigo, I was treated for depression, I was treated for catarrh behind the ear. But none of these things seemed to help me. And then eventually I was sent for this MRI scan, and it revealed that there was a tumour there in my brain. Now, if you'd asked me to describe how I felt, the only way that I could have described it at the time, it was just like there was a large pendulum swinging about in my head every time I moved. And I think it was getting to the point where I felt that people didn't believe what I was saying. So I was sort of glad in a way that they did find something. However, I went along to see 3 different surgeons all together, like they were all together, and they were discussing what they were going to do with me. And after some discussion with each other, they decided that it could wait for a month or 2 because there was no urgency in this tumour. It was a very slow growing thing, and the good news was it was benign. So they discussed it and asked, did I want to know any questions and want to ask any questions, and I asked them, what would be the outcome of this? The brain surgeon, he said that this tumour was growing on the acoustic nerve in this ear, and it was growing out into the brain. And the acoustic nerve would certainly be destroyed, and I would lose the hearing on that side. And he also said that it was growing out into the brain and would be attached to various things, so it would be only when they would go in there and see what it was attached to. He couldn't really tell me what would be affected. He said I might have slight facial paralysis. So anyhow, I asked him, just what would be the outcome of it. I was a wee bit curious to know what, I would be left like. And he said, well, it's like this. He said, with any surgery at all, there is a risk, but with brain surgery in particular, there is a greater risk. And he said the bottom line is you could live or you could die. Now that was lovely to be told. However, that particular summer was a good summer. Very unusual for this country, but it was one of those good summers that we would have. And we had a wee caravan, and we took ourselves off to Carrickfergus a few times that summer. My husband had some holidays, and he took several wee breaks, and we went along to Carrickfergus. And it was absolutely beautiful. The weather was beautiful, but when you're faced with something like this, everything becomes special to you. Everything becomes more important to you. And it was just lovely. We had some lovely times down there. And the Lord drew very near to us, like he really drew very near to us. And he just comforted us, and he spoke to us through his word. We read together, we prayed together, and we did a lot of talking. And they were just very special times, sort of precious times in my life. Now anyhow, at the end of that summer, it was the end of August when the letter came in to be admitted to hospital. And the night before I was admitted to hospital was a Sunday night. And I can remember the last hymn that night was, I'll just read it here to you, part of it. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. No merit of my own I claim, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. When weary in this earthly race, I rest on his unchanging grace. In every wild and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. And the last verse goes, when the last trumpet's voice shall sound, O may I then in him be found, clothed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. And the Lord just seemed to speak to me through that. And he seemed to just give me that peace in my heart to know that everything was going to be all right. I could sort of hear him speak to me and say, Margaret, if you die, you'll be with me. If you live, I will be with you. Because you see, the Lord has promised, I will never leave you. I learnt that years ago, and that has stayed with me. I will never leave you, and he never does. And so I went into hospital, and the night before my operation, this lady came into the ward. Now, this lady belonged to our church, Ruby Kincaid, and Ruby was a nurse in the Royal Victoria Hospital. And she came into the wee side ward I was in, and you know, she came in that door just like an angel. She's so softly spoken, the loveliest Christian woman. And she came over and talked to me, and she said, Margaret, would you like me to pray with you? And I said, yes, Ruby, that would be nice. And we prayed together, and she talked to me. And you know, there was just a peace come over me. You know, whenever you're a Christian, there's like a deep, deep calm in your heart. When all around you could be falling apart, you still have this peace, and it's undescribable. You couldn't describe it. It's just a peace that never leaves you. And when Ruby went out of the room that night, you know, she left a presence with her, and I really felt the Lord was with me that night. And the next day, I went to have the operation. Now, the operation lasted about 8 hours, and I assume it was the next evening, and Ruby was on that evening again. And I can remember Ruby hovering about the room. I could feel her presence. I knew she was there, but I wasn't really with it at all, you know. But she was there just to calm me and keep me calm. Now, during this time, I was very ill. And it was horrible. It was a terrible, terrible time for me. But I couldn't describe it, but I could feel the presence of the Lord with me right through it, right throughout the time I was ill, and I just was lying there in that hospital bed. And it was a precious, precious time to me. And I can remember thinking after it, I would go through that again for the experience of that presence with me. You know, I wouldn't be too sure about it, going through it all again today, but certainly just after it, when that was really ripe in my head, I would have gone through it again. So anyway, I recovered and I got home. Now, I was still quite ill, and this is a photograph of me just after the operation. And this is a photograph of me in Carrickfergus, just maybe a matter of weeks before it. And you can see the difference. Now I did come round and I could walk a little bit further and a little bit further, and I would have gone out always with my husband. I wouldn't have gone out on my own. I always had to have him by my side to hold on to because I was so unsteady on my feet. And this went on, and I depended on him quite a bit. And I was still depending on him 3.5 years later, whenever he was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And he died 5 weeks after the diagnosis. And, you know, that was another dreadful time in my life. Here was a person that was more or less my helper, my carer, and he was gone. He was gone. But again, the Lord just moved in and he comforted. And you've no idea how he just spoke to me through his word. There were hundreds of cards come in through the door, and people were so kind, and they had written wee verses and wee things on it, and you know, all these things really helped me through that time. And my family too were very, very good to me. I don't know what I would have done without them either. But gradually I come round. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, I'm not telling you it to get your sympathy. I don't want your sympathy. I don't need your sympathy because I'm happy. I'm really happy. I've lots and lots of lovely friends, and someday I'll see my husband again, and someday I'll be perfect. I'll be able to do everything. And it's just lovely to have that. So I'm not telling you to gain your sympathy in one way or another.